Hey, Senda.
Hey, Phil.
What do I do with these butterflies that are like all stuck in here before I go run a game?
Did they go through like a metamorphosis period first? Did they have the cocoon?
Oh God, I don't know. I don't want a cocoon inside me. I just thought they appeared as butterfly. Oh, gross. Cue music. And welcome to another episode of Panda's Talking Games. I am your host who's grossed out about the idea of butterflies growing inside of me, Phil.
And I am your other host, Senda, who couldn't come up with anything else in response to his butterfly statement. So that's what you all got.
And welcome to another pandemic episode. In these quarantines, a reminder that we are neither editing nor writing these episodes. So you get what you get. And apparently enough of you like it that you haven't gone anywhere, which tells us two things. One, thank you so very much for staying with us during these quarantines. And
secondly,
two,
we've been putting way too much effort into this show.
Two, we're probably never going back from this.
We're working way too hard. Why didn't y'all say something?
Apparently we were fine just like this. Anyway, so yes, this is another one of our pandemic episodes where we're kind of taking it easy, but still talking about game stuff. And we stumbled onto a topic for tonight. Do you want to tell us a little bit about our topic?
Yeah. So the Released podcast tagged us into the RPG for Life, or RPG for Life? I mean, yes, I do play RPGs for life, but that's not actually the hashtag. So the RPG Life UK hashtag posted by Cymat this last week about storytelling, and the prompt was Normally I would edit this, but you know what? You just get it straight. That's just how this works nowadays. Okay, we're going to try it again. Many vlogs, podcasts, and books show players how to GM, but nothing on how to tell a great story to be up in front of people and strangers. What wisdom can you pass on for potential GMs to do that thing, to deal and to cope? So the Released podcast tagged us into that because they wanted to hear what we might have to say about it, and we have some things to say about it.
We do indeed, right? So we're going to look at two things, one we're going to look at a little bit more than the other. So we're going to talk about stage fright and kind of overcoming stage fright.
Yep.
And then we're also going to talk a little bit at the end about storytelling.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think the majority of tonight's talk is going to be kind of settled on stage fright. So I guess we should probably do a quick little definition.
Yeah, sure. Let's define stage fright.
Sure. We've all heard the term before. I think we all have a pretty good understanding, but stage fright is that fear of performing in front of other people. So depending on your background, this could be, the school play. This could be a concert. If you play an instrument, this could be like if you are like my children, this could be getting up and doing a either performance or a test for in martial arts, right? Whatever it is, it's the activity it's the anxiety that comes with performing in front of an audience. And so that holds true also for GMs, because GMing is a performance.
Yeah. Can I add two things to that?
Yeah, please do.
So I think one thing that specifically differentiates stage fright from a lot of different varieties of nerves or anxiety that we experience is that it tends to be, because we're about to get up in front of a bunch of people, it tends to be very specifically about messing up in front of people and being judged. right?
Sure. I think that's yes. I think if we unpack what anxieties you have about getting up and performing, right? I think
those are the two fears, right? They usually like
yeah. So the one is, and I guess we can break them apart, right? So the one is something will go wrong. Right,
I will forget my line.
Forget your lines. Yep, absolutely.
I hate that one.
Yeah. The other one is that people will not like what you're doing.
Or you will mess up, and then they will judge you for messing up. So they also work together.
Right, but they also work apart, right?
And
like maybe
apart,
you're not messing up, and people don't like your performance. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those two things can haunt you a lot, right? And it can be, and this is, I think, part of the reason why this prompt came up, they can be a barrier for people for getting into GMing.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say, for me at least personally, and based on the way that other people also describe it, it has a stereotypical physical way of manifesting, which is I get nauseous.
That's the butterfly part, right? Like so the fluttering heart, clammy like sweaty,
hands,
sweaty,
and
clammy.
Like my tummy doesn't feel good.
Right, and a lot of this, and again, this is going to stretch my my biology days, but a lot of this is the fight or flight response, right? This is the adrenaline. This is the nervousness. And the reason we're worried about messing up is that the fight or flight response also kind of quashes some of your higher level thinking, right?
Yes.
So if you full on panic, right? Yeah. And that's not, like if you full on panic, that's how you blank out and forget your lines.
Yeah.
So so what we're talking about tonight is, and we're gonna just call it stage fright because I don't want to make up like a name like GM fright or something. Like it's stage fright.
No, it is. It's stage fright. Yeah.
And stage fright comes in a number of different varieties, right? Like as long as you are in front of a group of people and performing and nervous about either messing up or them judging you, you can insert a whole bunch of different situations into this, and they all wind up applicable.
Yes.
Because you, in your past, were a theater kid. Yeah. I never was, but I was in the sciences where having to speak about papers and experiments and things like that was a thing.
Yes.
So we both experienced stage fright in different places. And then also experienced it to some degree as GMs.
As GMs, and then and I don't actually know if you experienced it like this or not, but certainly when I first started podcasting, having a mic in my face was not a thing that made me feel very relaxed. It sure doesn't bother me anymore.
So
But do you remember? Has it been too long?
No, but it wasn't podcasting for me because remember, in my background, I was a college DJ before by the time
did you? But you were already comfy with mics.
By the time I was ready to podcast, I was like, this is a mic and this isn't even live. Right? Like
I could fix this later.
Right. Like I was on, so when I was in college, I was a DJ at the college radio station, and I guess I'll tell that in a second when we talk about getting over stage fright. But no, so for me, it wasn't being nervous about podcasting. I got nervous. Like I was nervous before that, but it was also performing. It was just being a DJ.
Yeah.
Okay. So cool. So I think we've set this up correctly, right? We've talked about stage fright. We've talked about that fear of messing up. We've talked about the anxiety of being judged. And we have kind of defined it as being a thing that's applicable in a number of situations. But specifically for tonight's talk, we're going to talk about it in terms of game mastering. But the reason why we're talking about it in a general sense is that if you, and this is be like a little secret for the episode, if you can combat it in one setting,
oh yeah,
you can tend to get over it in other settings.
Yes. Yeah.
And
the thing.
And I think before we jump into the tips, I think what I want to talk about is that you never completely get rid of stage fright.
Yeah, I was going to say that was my secret. My secret is, while I'm like perfectly comfortable having a mic in my face nowadays, when I am GMing or something, especially at a con where I don't know people or whatever, like, do I still get a little bit of stage fright? Absolutely I do. The secret is that it never completely goes away, and that's okay. It's just the goal is to have a manageable amount of stage fright that doesn't actually prevent you from doing the things that you want to do.
Right. And so I think what we're going to talk about as we unpack this discussion is really two things, right? There is acclimation.
Yes.
Right? So there's becoming comfortable with that feeling of anxiety and not letting it override you and put you into full fight or flight.
Yep.
And then there is so there's acclimation and I'm trying to think what the other one. Acclimation and I forgot the other one. Anyway, acclimation being probably the most important.
Preparation?
No.
What did you say? I don't know. We didn't come up with these words.
No. I'm just doing this like right off the top of my head.
I know, but acclimation is a really good word.
Well, no. So acclimation's part of it, right? So acclimation is the you can function despite being nervous. And then I guess the other one we'll use is mitigation, which is what are the things I can do to make myself less nervous. And the thing is, you will wind up needing some combination of these two things.
And everyone is different about which things work better for them. Because I will tell you, despite my best efforts, and frankly, at this point, 4 years of therapy, I don't function on nerves. I just don't. And that's the way that my life is. And so for me, the pendulum sways very much into mitigation, less than acclimation, right? I mean, there's a little bit of acclimation, but it swings very heavily into mitigation for me. So also, this is like, find the balance that works for you.
Exactly. Yes. So all of that said, this is a very real thing. I think I can comfortably say, having been a new GM years ago, and an old GM now, that it is something that in some form or another is with you throughout your GMing career.
I live inside you forever. No.
I don't.
I'm just having a TikTok moment.
No, it's fine.
Carry on.
I don't get nervous running games for my home group.
Right.
Right. I don't even think about that. That's just I just jump into the game and we're fine. Now, I will say that I'm sometimes concerned that they're not having fun, but it's not irrational, right? It's not panicky. But if I'm running con games, I still totally get butterflies.
Me too. Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally. And I, with coming up on 40 years of GMing.
Good heavens. Well, aren't I a spring chicken?
Coming up on 40 years of GMing.
I'm only coming up on 20 years of gaming. Whatever.
I still get a little fluttery about running for strangers.
You got cocoons just growing in there all the time.
That's what I'm talking about. It's gross. That's a really bad analogy. Come out. All right. I think we have a couple things now that we've kind of set up some groundwork here. What do you got in the notes, in our little hastily written notes to lead us?
Yeah. So I think we're going to jump into some tips that we both use, or some of the things that we each use to help us mitigate. And I think these are mostly mitigation tips.
I'm just going to ask you, are we doing the first part here? Is this about how we initially got over?
Oh, did you? I thought we we kept going. No, let's do that initial part.
Okay,
Sorry.
let's do that. So
back it up, roll the train backwards.
Beep beep.
Good. So we're going to talk about how we kind of initially got over it, because I already said the thing I was going to say, which is that I didn't. In fact,
But you kind of did.
I have in certain circumstances, which is the thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
But it's really interesting. I am a theater kid. I'm a theater kid who had to take a bunch of acting classes because you are required to take acting classes to be a theater kid. But I am a technical theater kid, and I'm a technical theater kid for a reason. And that reason is when I am relying on my brain to functionally provide me with things like memorized lines, and I am feeling nervous, that is when my brain blanks out. Not a fan. But I am much better at not worrying about having to remember something, which makes me much less nervous, and just improvising it, which, gosh, it's like my GMing does that too. So the thing that I kind of learned is like, I spent a reasonable amount of time on stage in front of people, both in high school and in college. I did not particularly enjoy it, which is like why I'm not an actor, but I spent a lot of time on stage as a younger child and didn't have a problem with it. But also got super stage frighty. And then discovered that I could be involved in other ways that still like were, in the performance, and went that way with it, which was interesting. The thing that definitely did it for me was not being forced into more acting classes. It was definitely being more and more comfortable with improvising. Because if I don't have to remember something, I am much better at coming up with it in the moment than I am at trying to keep it all in my head while I'm nervous.
How can you possibly forget it if it was never in there to begin with?
Exactly. It's true. And so this is just like a little sidebar here. This is why I am terrible at game mechanics, because I can read that book 5 times and not remember that key rule in the middle of the thing that I need it for, because I get nervous and it's gone. And then I have to look it up again, right? And this is why I don't run pre-run adventures, because even if I went through and I prepped them the way that you have been prepping them, with like highlights and notifications and all of those things, when I got nervous actually running it and trying to keep track of all that stuff and trying to remember it, it would be gone. And I would basically be like starting from scratch as if I had never read it. So like those are actually 2 things on specifically why certain types of game prep don't work for me. And it is because of the way that my particular body and brain work with stress, anxiety, and nerves, and how that mixes with being in front of people.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I know one of the things that happens to you in highly charged emotional situations is that you actually don't aren't often able to recall what happened.
Yeah, like I'm when I say I shut down, I shut down.
Exactly.
Like, if I don't write things down, even just having conversations that I know are going to bring up emotional stuff, but that I know I need to have because I need to get answers about things or whatever, if I don't write that stuff down, like, it's gone. And, that is worse now because I have some particular conditioning that I'm, working with in my life, because we all move through life and gather more baggage as we go. But I've never been someone who has excelled at logical, remembered, planned stuff in high states of adrenaline. I never, ever have been. I am a freeze response adrenaline person. I am not an action response adrenaline person. And that means that when the adrenaline hits, me remembering things is like,
Right. So I think what's really interesting about this is because of that, your GMing style has adapted to that.
It has, because I know exactly the kind of thing that I can keep in my mind. And this spreads into our tips stuff, right?
Well,
so
I don't want to spread too.
Keep it
save that for the tips
controlled. Part. But it basically is like I'm pretty aware of the kind of information that I can retain versus the kind that I can't retain. And so my prep, the actual game prep that I do, and this has a lot of influence on how I prep games, right? The kind of game prep that I do is very specifically the kind of stuff that I can A, remember, or B, make up if I forgot it, or C, draw the same conclusion that I drew when I was prepping it, even though I've forgotten it, I'm doing it again in the moment, right? Like,
Sure. Yeah, it makes complete sense.
so yeah, that's like that it drives a lot of how I manage all of that stuff, how I and how I game in general, and definitely how I GM. And that's why I tend to be going back to our proactive versus reactive episodes in the article that I wrote about those concepts. That is why I personally tend to be a reactive GM.
So what I think is really interesting is that I think I'm going to tell, in a second, I'm going to tell my story, and I think it's going to wind up being very true for me and very different from yours. Right?
I know that it will be. I mean, I know that it will be because I think that I know that you can GM like me now, right? But like your default GM style and what made you comfortable for a very long time was really not that.
No. Right?
Yeah. So go for it.
Okay. So I actually did have terrible stage fright all the way up until college. So by the time I got to my junior year of college, I had gotten through a few public speaking things terribly in high school and things like that.
Not a lot of fun because you have to memorize things.
I did not enjoy it. Right, I did not enjoy that kind of experience. But I was I was on a track to head into grad school. And so a group of my professors that were mentoring me, there were 3 of them, decided that I needed to get over my fear of speaking. And in 1 month, signed me up for 4 speaking events. Where I had to talk on a variety of topics to various groups, some people being experts, some people being novices, things like I gave a talk to the American Chemical Society about dye formations in enzymatic dye markers for biological assays and things like that. And I gave anyway 4 talks in 4 weeks. So I learned to get over stage fright through acclimation, right? Like I learned to get through it by basically, I didn't die the first day on the first talk, and I didn't die on the last one. And then I was like, okay, apparently I won't die if I do this, right? So I just I just survived it. And was I nervous for the first one? Terribly nervous. But, and this goes to my GMing style as well, the way I combated being nervous about it was I gave that talk in my dorm room probably 8 times.
Yes.
Right? Like I gave it to an empty room. I sat and went through it, and I kind of went through my notes and, got really comfortable with it and knew the timing and all of that stuff. And so preparedness got me, like that's the mitigation part, which we'll talk about when we talk about tips. But I did all those. And then, like we said earlier, I was also a DJ in college from my sophomore through my senior year. And being a DJ in college, on one hand, is easier because you perform alone in a box, right? Like you sit in the DJ booth and there's no one around and you just do this, like you talk to a microphone. Except that I was broadcasting my stuff out over a actual fairly large area of Western New York based on the antenna from the FM station that I used to work at. That was Rochester, which is an hour east of where I live now, all the way into Canada. So it had some reach. But that had the added challenge that not only did you have to be able to speak, you technically had to be able to run everything as well. Yeah. Without messing things up, right? Yes. Like you had to be able to cue music and do those like cool DJ cuts, because I was a DJ in a time before Skynet DJ'd. So you did all that shit manually. Yep. So in the course of a few years of college, I very quickly became acclimated to performance, even though I was a big science nerd. I became acclimated to it. And then right out of college, into my first couple jobs, I had to start doing public presentations, and that's actually never stopped. I in pre-COVID times are usually good for two to three talks a year at various conferences. And I've given, small talks at very small conferences. I have spoken to some fairly large groups, like all the project managers at an aerospace company, those kinds of things. And so, ironically, I did more public speaking than I did running games for strangers for the longest time. I didn't actually like running games for strangers for the longest time. Like, it was only until I got into podcasting and publishing. For the longest time. Thanks.
Carry on. That was just background music.
Thanks. It wasn't until I got into podcasting and publishing where running games at cons and stuff was, important. And I finally was like, fine, I will run games for strangers. Like, up to that point, I just ran games for friends, which, was never anxiety producing because they're your friends. And like,
it wasn't. Oh boy, it was anxiety producing for me.
I say that like the first time I ran for these guys, I'm sure I was nervous, but
now it's been so long you don't remember.
It doesn't register. Like if I change the chemistry of my group, I'm always a little nervous, but then like it shakes back out. Anyway, so for me, my route was like, I don't recommend it for everyone, but mine was like trial by fire. Right.
I mean, there's a little bit of that. And I have to admit that like I don't get the same level of butterflies GMing that I used to, right?
Oh, no, me neither. But I still get them.
I still totally get them, especially at cons. But like, I used to get even like shaky and stuff, but it was one of those, but I just did it anyway.
Now, do you want to know where I get the most butterflies?
Where?
Is Metatopia.
Oh my God, Metatopia.
Right? Because Metatopia is not only am I going to GM for this group of people, but the fear of will they like this?
It's the judging part.
Right. Like that's through the roof because I'm literally putting either something that's never been vetted before.
Here's my baby.
Here's my baby.
Is it broken?
Is it ugly? Like, is it pretty? Is it ugly? Yeah. So that's, Metatopia, like, even, like, when we first went to Metatopia, I was pretty scared about running my first adventures at Metatopia.
Yeah.
Just for that reason, right? And what I really like, and this is, we'll drift into tips in a second, but my mitigation for that is that you and I play test together.
Yeah, it helps a lot.
It helps a lot because I know
we're not alone.
I know there's somebody here. And in the early days when we play tested, you would actually play.
Yeah.
But in later years, we would take turns GMing. Like when we did Ditch Lilies, we co-GM'd that game.
And it was actually great because here's the thing about us co-GMing in a situation, right, that has the potential for high stage fright. Because the thing is, if I forget something, you're going to remember it.
Yes, and if I get lost looking for something, you will jump in and take it going. Yes, we are very.
It actually works really well.
We are very well teamed up for.
It went pretty smoothly when we started experimenting with it last year.
Yeah.
It was very pleasing.
And maybe that's another thing that we don't often talk about, but maybe the other way you get over your stage fright is don't GM alone.
Yeah, you don't have to do it by yourself.
We did a whole last year.
Yeah.
We did a whole series about co-GMing.
Very focused on very detailed co-GMing negotiation, which hilariously, when we actually did it for the Ditch Lilies, we did not implement to that level. We haven't actually truly
I'm going to suggest to you.
Yeah.
Or not suggest, but my memory is that we recorded those episodes after Metatopia.
Oh, you're right. Because we were going to do it at Origins. But there was no Origins this year.
But pandemic. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. So we've both talked about how we kind of got over it. Let's talk about a few tips. Just a few tips on how you kind of survive it day to day, like survive it game to game now.
Yeah. Do you want to jump back and forth, or because these are probably pretty quick, we could just go down each of our lists?
Yeah, just blast through yours and then I'll blast through mine.
Cool. Okay. So for me, the things that, and these are pretty much mitigation things for me, right? And I think these are, when we talk about tips, I think we're pretty much talking about mostly mitigation. And so for me, there's a little bit of prep, right? Prep does it. But for me, that prep takes the form of, as I was sort of starting to say before, basically understanding the starting point of the story without having to know how it will go or remember how it ends or remember to keep track of like something that has to thread through it or all of that stuff. Like that will happen for me at the table. As long as I understand where the story starts and what the opposition is that is going to drive this forward as the characters react to it, I don't need to plan anything else. And I can keep that much in my poor little lizard brain when the adrenaline hits.
Or on a post-it note.
Or, well, that's the other part, right? Because if it's on a post-it note, I don't have to flip through a bunch of pages to find it or to try to remember it. Like, the last time I was the most anxious GMing, actually, was when I ran your adventure for Part-Time Gods of Fate. And I was trying to remember your adventure. And I was like, blah. And like halfway through, I was like, whatever happens, happens. I can't remember all the details. Because I couldn't find all the stuff fast enough to react to it when I wanted to in the game. Right? And I can't remember it when it's in my head. So hilariously, that is on the RPG Academy feed somewhere. You can catch it. But that was probably the most nervous I've been running a game in a long time because I was trying to remember all this stuff. So yeah, it's key to me that I can see at a glance, or I know in my heart at a glance, exactly what the purpose of the game is. And that's why things like lasers and feelings and stuff work really well for me, right? Like when I have a one sentence, this is where it's going, I can hang on to that and I can go with it. So that's the first part of it for me, is my version of prep and what that looks like, right? The next one is, and I know that Phil really likes these for different reasons, but for me, cheat sheets. Right? Because again, I'm mitigating the need to hunt for rules during the game because I can reference them quickly and I know where they are. And I don't have to keep them in my head where the memory thing stops working when I get nervous. So, basically anything that I can do that is like things that I need to run the game that don't require me to remember them. And the secondary part of that, of course, is that there is also a good reason why I tend to run lighter games, right? And why I tend to put less emphasis on heavy mechanical things in the games themselves. And it's because it's either on the cheat sheet or I don't remember it. And that's fine. And the other interesting thing that I do, which is funny because Phil actually had to point it out to me because I forget that I do this all the time. It's both a table control thing for me, which I know I've talked about it in a table control way, but it is also a way to kind of feel like I have some control over the situation personally, is I tend to stand when I'm GMing a ton. It makes me feel like I'm more in charge, and therefore I am more in charge, and therefore I am less nervous. And when I am less nervous, I can remember things better. It's great. So I tend to be a standing GM. I usually stand for at least 50% of every game that I GM, depending on how much my feet hurt and how long I've been at that con. But that's usually about how it goes. Yeah. What are your tips?
Sure.
Do you remember?
So
I have them written down if you don't.
What was that?
I have them written down if you don't remember.
No, that's fine. Let's see how I do.
Yeah.
So my first tip has a lot to do, and I honestly don't remember where I got this piece of advice, but I use it for public speaking as well as for GMing at cons and things like that. And that is to always be the first person in the room. So for public speaking, like show up to your talking thing before everyone else gets to the room. That way, one, you walk into an empty room, so there's no judgment, right? Like there's no one there. So you walk in clean. And then 2, every person then comes to you. Right. And so now you psychologically, much like Obi-Wan Kenobi, psychologically, you have the high ground.
Yes.
Right.
I don't psychologically. I just stand up. Because then I am higher than everyone else at the table.
So the way that translates when I run games for events like cons, game days, and things like that is, I am habitually early to wherever it is. And what I like to do is, as soon as possible, I will take my table. So, like for instance, if we're at Origins, I don't do anything the hour before I GM. I'll go hang out somewhere, go get a coffee, relax, whatever. But around half hour before my session, I get up and go and find my table. And if no one is running at my table, I will just sit down and start setting everything up.
Yep.
Right. And then that way, when the time comes around and people start to show up, I'm sitting at the table and I'm in control of the table and people are approaching me and then sitting down. And for me, what I find really interesting in this discussion is you prepare to not remember anything.
Yes, because I'm not going to remember anything.
I am so the thing that I learned, right? So the lesson that I learned from getting over my stage fright was, as long as I feel like I'm in control, I can keep everything moving. Right. So for me, it's really important to establish a level of control and comfort, and then I'm fine. So that's like, I like to be there first, right? So when I'm public speaking, I am standing at the podium as people are coming in the room, and then I like have a quick chit chat with them in those minutes before the talk, and that puts me at ease, right? Because I'm in control of that. So I like that. And to complement that, the other thing I do is I prep. Now, I've said this in many occasions, right? First of all, prep is whatever it is you need to be comfortable in order to run the game. So when I run games for conventions, I have I don't want to say extensive, but I have detailed notes, and I do them all in bullets because I don't look to try to read paragraphs in a con situation, or even when I run regular games. I do everything in bullet points, headers and bullets. I don't make myself adhere to them past a certain point in the game, but I have them so that, and this is my training from being a DJ in college, is that, and this actually goes to my prep and to my cheat sheets, is no dead air.
Yeah.
Right? That's a thing that when I was on the radio, they were pretty aggressive about beating into you, was no dead air. And I forget what the stat is, but it's like within 10 or 15 seconds of a radio station going silent, people will just change to the next radio station. So no dead air. It's why on the mics, if there's a technical problem, like when we do misdirected mark or something, I'll just start talking.
Yep.
Right. Because I will fill, like, I have been conditioned to be terrified of that space. And the same thing is true when I run games. I do not want to not know what to do. So my prep for a game is sometimes more extensive than if I was running a home game. And I likely won't use all of it, and I don't care, right? Because the prep did the job it needed to, which was to get me to the table in a calm manner so that I could run. And then the cheat sheets for me is that I will remember that there is a rule, but I play so many games, which we had a long talk about this, and we're not going to get into the show, but the more correct term might be pan-gamerous, not polygamerous.
Right, it might be.
Right, but in either case, whichever one of those I am, and I think I am actually both.
Yep, agree.
My problem is, it's not that I'm going to blank on the rule. It's that I've played so many games that I know there's a rule, but it's doubtful I'm going to remember the exact parts of it. Like, I'm running 3 games right now, and I can't remember the skill lists for any of my games.
Between, like, DCC and, like, Forbidden Lands, though, like, no wonder. I mean, they're close.
I constantly, like, well, one, there is no skill list in DCC, but, like, I can never remember the skill list in Forbidden Lands, right? Like, I'm like, make a stealth, hidey check, whatever that is. Like, I think you guys know what I want. Just make that roll.
Tell me what it is.
Right. So having a cheat sheet allows me to remember which game I'm running. And that helps me immensely, because if I do remember which game I'm running and I'm kind of dialed in, again, then
you feel in control.
Everything about my GMing for strangers is to remain calm.
I just gave up on remaining calm. And
right. You're just like, well,
I'm going to forget everything anyway. So, like, what do I do to mitigate that one in half?
Exactly. Yours is like, it's definitely I'm just not gonna be calm. So how do I just work around that? And mine is like,
exactly.
Right. And mine is like, I will be calm. Here are the handful of things I need to just stay level.
Calm. Yes.
Yeah. So that's where cheat sheets and prep come in for me is again, it's maintaining the feeling of control. And I will tell you, and I think this is to the same thing that you said, a lot of this are the little bullshit mental games that I play with myself in order to feel like I'm in control. Like, that little thing about being in the room first, that little bullshit works for me. So I just go with it. Like,
well, and I feel like I should state, because I feel like you may have glossed past it a little bit. It's not just that you're in the room first. It's that you're in the room and you have pulled out the packet of arranged papers and you have laid out the table in a very specific way, right? And you have your things in a very specific place and your dice in a very specific place. And the things for the players are arranged very specifically to be accessible in the right way.
What's the French word for that?
Mise en place.
Yes, mise en place. Yes. I am a big fan of that, right? It helps me maintain control if I don't have to look for something on the table.
Yeah.
Like, so my dice,
that's part of the mind game.
Right. Yeah, it is absolutely part of the mind game, right? Like, my dice are always to the left of me. Like, I know, like, even just as soon as I said it, my hand moved out to my left.
Yeah, you're
because
like, yes,
that's where I keep my dice.
Go.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then cards and stuff over to the right, and then notes in the middle, that kind of thing. Yes, iPad. I have a very formatted way of laying out my table for a game. By the way, this should come as no shock to you that is exactly what I do when I cook.
Yeah, I know what cutting board you got for Christmas last year. It has
the one with the measuring
lines on it to tell you the difference between diced, chopped. I don't even know what else.
I know my knife fork has a lot to be desired. But here's the thing. I am one who very much, especially if it's a new recipe, very much so if it's a new recipe, I will do all the prep, and I will have 100 little bowls lined up on my counter, and then I will start cooking, so that all I have to do is like grab an ingredient and pour it in. Like, I look like a fucking cooking show when I cook. If I'm comfortable with a thing, it's a little more loosey-goosey.
Oh yeah, I turn real messy with things I'm comfortable with.
I tend not to be, right? Like, because if I lose control and panic while I'm cooking, I will screw something up. So the way I stay in control is everything is laid out. And then I just move from I don't trust myself to be able to chop this thing fast enough before this thing needs it, or I'm going to burn it. So I just chop it, put it in a little bowl, right? Like, you can tell anytime I've done a new recipe because there's like 500 of those little square bowls, like in the sink, because I just sat there and measured everything out. Anyway.
Everything. Yeah. Good.
So for me, you're absolutely right. I do, as one of my tips is, I do know how I like how I like my space laid out. Again, it goes back to it goes back to not only no dead air, but it's my comfort zone. Things are where I expect them to be. So I don't have to think about them. It also ties into getting to the table first, because if I show up to the table and everybody's already sat down and put their stuff out and I now have to try to fit my stuff,
then you can't put it the way that you want to and you're not in control of it. I know.
It's
like I've been playing with you for a while at conventions.
It is all just little head games to make it work. The thing is, it works. So I guess as I'm coming to the end of mine, and we're coming to the end of this, and honestly, I think we're only going to just speak for just a few moments
just
about
a second here on storytelling. But it's quick because we've talked about a lot of this stuff before. Right.
But just to kind of sum up, you're not going to die from performing and GMing, right? So that's the first thing. Like, you're not going to die. 2, you're going to find little things that work for you, right? Little quirks, little superstitions, little habits, whatever. Some people would tell you should just get over them. I'm going to tell you the opposite.
Yeah.
Just embrace them. Like, if the little trick about showing up first would also make you feel comfortable, do that. If standing up is going to make you feel comfortable, stand up. Don't you're not going to erase this feeling. You're just going to beat it.
Yeah, you're mitigating it. These are mitigation techniques.
You're going to win this battle, right? Between being so afraid that you won't run and running.
Yeah.
So take whatever allies you got to take with you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, whatever that is, prep, a GM
prep,
screen.
Not prep. It's really funny that not prep is the answer
prep,
for me.
Your lucky big die. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. If that's the thing that helps you get your game going, then yeah, just do it. It's fine. It's totally fine. All right. Quick last piece onto that thing, because we really focused, and I think I really liked having our discussion about stage fright.
I agree.
But a little bit about storytelling. I'll really quickly give a couple tips on storytelling if you want to tack onto it as well.
Sure.
I think the way that you become a good storyteller, and this is, for me, this ties into a lot of the things I talk about when we talk about genre, is one, you got to consume, right? You got to consume media. You got to see how other people are telling stories. And then you got to look at, you got to first register what you like. Like, I like this kind of storytelling. I don't like this kind of storytelling. And then you got to dissolve it. What is it you like about this storytelling? Is it that this story, like, these stories are always told in media res, or they're always told as flashbacks, or they use this narrative structure, whatever that is. So consume, decompose, and then incorporate. The last part being, once you understand what it is you like, oh, I really like this TV show because it often starts in media res. Or I like James Bond movies because James Bond movies always start in media res. Then look at how you take that and apply it to your game, right? How can I start my games in media res?
Right.
As a quick example.
Yep. No.
Those 3 steps.
I think that's a really good way to approach storytelling. And the only thing that I will kind of just add on there is that storytelling is also an art that you can practice. And it's practicing things like practicing describing things, practicing creating the kind of scenes that you have enjoyed in stories, and frankly, having a vocabulary to be able to do the kind of conversational storytelling that you want to do, whatever that means to you. But it does mean that it's just another reason to continuously consume stories, right? And heck, to practice writing them and to practice speaking them, because it makes you use the words. And the more you use the words, the more comfortable you will be with words.
I will say one last thing to that is if you have a peer group, like other GMs or other creatives, things like that, having the discussions about why you like these things. Like sometimes,
great.
Like that's a thing you and I will often do is like, we'll talk about a show and then we'll talk about like, oh, what I really like is, like I like that, like I like that Steven Universe does this thing.
Yes. And then it's like, cool. How would I implement that in a game? Because it's so neat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But sometimes having a peer group, having a friend, having a group of group of people, a Discord channel or whatever, like having a group take apart certain scenes is a great way to practice that skill of of not just saying like, oh, I liked this movie, but specifically, what did you like in this movie? And then the question I always ask is, what did they do here to make me like this? Those kinds of things.
Yeah. Cool.
So that I think that will help you immensely with storytelling. We could probably, if people have more questions about storytelling and want to send it to us, which will segue nicely into the closing of the show, we could certainly expand upon that in future episodes. But in order for us to get to the closing, we must move past this one barrier, that barrier being talking about another show on the network, and that is Senda's job, so tell us about another show.
Yes, on tonight's show, I'm going to tell you about the Gnomecast, because I just recorded one the other day, so you know that sometime soon you will hear me go very, very long on the Gnomecast again, which is always delightful. Sorry, Rob. But you're awesome anyway. So on the Gnomecast, we gather a bunch of gnomes, talk about a topic, sometimes something that we've written articles about, and sometimes not. Right now, we're going to be doing a really cool run. We've gone back to the RPG a day inspiration words from August, and we're doing a run of talking about a bunch of those words and asking each other questions about them. So that's very cool, and it's going to be going on for a little bit, I think, until everybody's had a chance to jump in who would like to. So go check those out. It's going to be neat stuff.
I dig it.
Mm-hmm.
Say, Senda, where do people find us on the internet?
Well, you can find us on the
Oh, you want to... Got a name for that?
Yeah. You can find us on Twitter at Pandas Talk Games. You can find us in the Misdirected Mark forums, which is forums.misdirectedmark.com, or you can find us by dropping us an email, panda@misdirectedmark.com. And Phil, once they find us in one of those places, what can they do with that information?
Well, by all means, please let us know what you would like us to talk about. We really try not to do this show based on topics that only we want to talk about. Otherwise, you get all sorts of nonsense. But rather, we like to stay focused and on topic for something that you find interesting because, well, honestly, we're trying to be helpful. And if we can answer people's questions or talk about a topic they find interesting, then that's really pleasing to us. So do that, or even just do what happened here, which is like tag us onto somebody else's thing and be like,
cool thing. You should
right? Like, I don't know,
it.
pandas. What do you think about this? Like, that kind of move will get you an episode. Like,
apparently, here we are. It was cool. We did it.
Yeah, I mean, if I, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, yeah, we're doing this episode.
Did you just kick your mic?
I did.
Man, I'm not editing this, right?
Yeah, sorry. Anyway, we really like to do shows about the things that you find interesting. So please keep feeding us ideas and we'll keep doing shows. Now, if you like what we do here elsewhere on the Misdirected Mark Network, please consider supporting our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MMP. Your patronage goes a long way into keeping the lights on for the network. Everything from bandwidth and backups and hosting for, where we put up all the episodes that you download, to mics and cords and lights and Zoom accounts and all sorts of nonsense. There's a lot of stuff that goes on for making a network, and your patronage helps make all of that possible. It's a bigger deal than I think you know. So we appreciate it immensely. If you do wind up patroning the show, you're going to get a couple things. You're going to get the bonus outtakes from this show, which are pretty damn funny. You're going to get the after show from Misdirected Mark. That's a grab bag of that can be anything from really funny to weird to ranty. Like, it's just however we come off that show is what winds up in the after show. But I think right now in this pandemic times, I think the biggest value you get is access to the Slack Room for Life. Slack Room for Life is our Slack community. It is just full of wonderful humans that are all just kind of supporting each other right now through these times. Just having a community of people where you can talk about games if you like. You can talk about media. You can talk about just what's going on in your life. I mean, if people, complaining about work, and everybody's, there to support them. And on top of that, that community also has a Friday luncheon, which I love. I look forward every week to the Friday luncheon where we meet up on Zoom. A whole bunch. Whoever can make it meets up on Zoom and we eat our lunches. I mean, many of us are eating lunch.
Some of you do, but for me, it is 10:30 in the morning, so I do not consume.
Second breakfast.
Yes.
Second breakfast for you. Lunch for me. And cocktails for Andrew Dacey, who's in the UK, who's already starting his weekend by the time he joins the call. But anyway, it's just the Slack Room for Life is just a really nice place. It's very friendly. If you want to talk about shows, you can. If you want to talk about games, you totally can. And if you just want to just hang with people who are just really cool people, I love the people in our Slack room. They've done a lot for getting me through these quarantines. Okay. Enough of that. If you are already patroning the show, which we thank you very much, and if you're unable to, which we totally understand, there's still another thing you can do. I talk about it a lot. If you listen to us, you will love us. Not really going to go into it in any depth. But again, after you have made everyone in your house listen to our show, there's another thing you can do that helps us immensely. Senda, what is that thing?
You could leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or the podcatcher of your choice. Every new review we get really does actually help people find new shows. Our show, not just new shows, our show. When they go looking for a new show, they might find our show because you reviewed it. It really does help the algorithms and stuff. So we really, really do appreciate it, a lot. Also, it gives us this warm, glowy feeling of artistic validation, because that whole thing we were just talking about where you're like, Stagefright, people are judging you. When people say nice things about us, it makes us feel warm and fuzzy inside, instead of there are little butterfly cocoons in our tummies.
Yes, that.
Just going to keep coming back to that today.
Creepy, but thank you.
Are you gonna wrap us up from there? What? Thank you all who've already left reviews. We really do appreciate them. They give us warm, fluttery feelings.
Say, Senda, do you think you'll have more stage fright when we eventually go back to conventions?
I have no idea. What a horrifying thought. This show is a joint production of She's a Super Geek and Misdirected Mark Productions, the media arm of Encoded Designs.
Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh?
Clicky waveforms. Yes, looks good. All right, we're on a mission, and we're wishing someone would cure your lonely condition, looking for love in all the wrong places. Oh, look at you. Not even a clue, huh?
I mean, when you said looking for love in all the wrong places.
If you want it, you got it. No? Young MC bust a move.
It's always bust a move whenever.
That is the if you want to if you want to know
drinking coffee, it's like 1:00 in the morning.
If you want to know where Gen Z and millennials separate, it's right around that line right there.
Yeah,
the recognition of bust a move.
I am actually like one of the. I actually was watching a TikTok on this the other day. I'm one of the invisible like micro generations. They call them Zennials.
Yes. Yeah. Because you are.
That's me.
Yeah, you are, because you are on the early end of the millennials. So you actually at times there are times where you have more in common with later Gen Xers than you do with later millennials. But
yes.
You and I are spaced far enough apart that things like I didn't have a cell phone because there weren't any until my 20s.
Yes. Versus my dad and I shared one when I was in high school, so I could call him if I was going to be late coming home from school. Yeah, I mean, it is funky. It's funky.
Okay.
Play that funky music. Okay.
Yes, I'm signaling that we should actually do the show part.
I'm stopping. We should do the show now.
Bum, bum.
What did you expect me to do with that situation?